Welcome back to the Breaking Zone. A lot's happened in the last week.
This is Dave.
We should
Brian.
we should definitely start. We were in Spain.
Yep.
MotoGP was in Spain. It wasn't the most exciting race, although a lot happened.
Yep.
It was actually a very significant race.
Yep. So a couple things. So the contracts are all finalized. Everything is basically done and dusted now. Everyone's in their seats for next year. I think we're all pretty much settled. Miller's going to keep his ride. I think we're all relieved that we're going to get to keep Jack around for at least one more season.
Thank you, Yamaha, for doing the right thing and keeping. And they'd be silly not to. He's ridden every single V4.
And I don't think they ever had a better option, frankly, for that spot. So I'm glad it finally worked.
Yeah, and he's a fan favorite. We all love Jack.
Yeah. As far as the weekend goes, the sprint race was kind of typically less interesting.
I almost didn't watch the sprint race because typically I thought it was above average sprint race. There was kind of a lot of action in the sprint race. It was worth watching.
There was more passing than there has been at other ones. It seems like in the sprint, because everyone can just go for broke and they run soft tires and they don't care about conservation at all. They do all push a little bit harder. That tends to, in most places, it tends to string out the race quick because the fast guys are the fast guys, and there's no back and forth between them and slower riders who are pushing. But this was a better one. We had Alex, who was the clear favorite from Friday. He was just faster everywhere all weekend long. He looked great
Until all of a sudden,
just one little mistake.
he said he got distracted.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Yeah.
And
So it was unfortunate. I was bummed for that. I think even Mark, who won the sprint race, was bummed that Alex didn't win the sprint race.
yeah, because Mark has said clearly that he doesn't really want to win the championship yet. And you can see that over the course of the weekend, even in the main event, that he was taking fewer chances. I think he knows he has the championship. He's not taking as big a risks. And fortunately, even though he's still unbelievably dominant, it's making the racing a little bit better because he's not as so far off in the front.
And I think this track lends itself to not being a Marc Marquez track. It's heavily right-handed. It's not a very grippy surface. And he is just not, with the injury and so forth, he's just not as magical in right-handers as he is in lefts. Even then, he still had two pretty good saves on the front end and left-hand corners where he picked it back up. And I don't think he can get away with that stuff on the right still.
Yeah, his right still isn't as strong. And I read that the aggregate they use for this track is a heavy clay base, and that's part of why it has very little grip, and it still shreds the tires.
Yep.
So it just kind of sloughs off and tears the rubber off at the same time. Pretty unique for that track. And typically that challenge, I think, makes this track really good for racing because there's a lot more sliding. And it seems like, I'm kind of like jumping all over the place here, that the KTMs did extremely well here because it almost appears like the KTM wants to be a little bit sideways. And so when you're on a track or in a situation where there's a little bit less grip and the bike can move a little bit more, it seems to perform better.
It definitely seems to, especially coming into turn one at Catalunya. The sprint race, the highlight of the sprint race was the 3 KTMs, right? By far the highlight. I think we'll get to Fabio in a little bit, but watching the 3 KTMs try to knock each other out was a heck of a good little race to watch between the three of them. To see this sort of resurgence of Bastianini, who I think in the first half of the season, most people had kind of written him off.
I think that's Bastianini in a nutshell. Like when he shows up, he's unbelievably talented, but then he just kind of disappears for 3 races and you don't ever see him again. And then he shows up like he did this weekend and you're like, wow, how come you're not doing this every weekend? And he doesn't, like the interviews I've seen with him, he doesn't seem to care that he just disappears for 3 or 4 rounds and then all of a sudden he's back at the front putting on an extremely good show.
Yeah, he performed extremely well. He had a couple of amazing slow motion passes on the brakes that were just incredible to watch. So I don't know. He has maybe more talent than the majority of the field, but just does not seem to be able to keep it consistent for some reason. biggest disappointment has got to be Bagnaia.
Right. So I was thinking about this. He qualified abysmally, right? The sprint, his performance was, but he did okay in the race. I was thinking about that. If you think about the weekend, the race is actually where they're going the slowest. The lap times are the lowest during the race because more distance, they have to stretch the tire. You're going from a high fuel load to a low fuel load. So the race is almost like his best shot. There's something still with that Ducati that he can't quite square. And I wonder if he would be better off taking advice from Dave, MotoGP. He should listen to Dave to like not worry about it so much and just go out there and ride and have fun. This almost right off this year and do what you can to survive, stay fit, don't take an injury, and just ride as best you can because next year it's all going to change. The Ducati next year is not going to be the same. I anticipate that Ducati will go back. They can't go forward, but they can go back to a previously homologated engine, from what I understand, that they'll go back to the GP24 for next year. So just kind of ride it out, I think, would be in his best interest.
Yeah, and I mean, for all I know, that's what he is doing, right? Because he doesn't crash. If he's pushing, it's not externally visible how hard he's pushing. I watched his laps, and you see him get halfway through a lap, and then he kind of bails on the lap. And now I know as a rider, sometimes he'll have a moment that from the outside didn't look like much of a moment, but he's not pushing like you would think he would be pushing. He doesn't look anything like Quatararo looks.
Right. And I think we should talk about Quatararo because I think based on this last race, if I had to pick the two most talented riders this year, I would pick Marquez and Quatararo. Yeah. Quattararo's performance on a wildly inferior motorcycle and him going out there and putting it all on the line showed just unbelievable talent. It was incredible to watch what he was doing on that Yamaha.
I agree with you. I think he is pushing really hard all the time. And I think we sometimes say, oh, the other Yamaha riders, they're not pushing as hard as he is. I just don't think they have the talent that he has either. Right. So even if they're pushing, because you watch, Rins crashed at the race. Miller crashes. He's kind of a crasher. So I can't say that those guys aren't pushing. They just definitely aren't his level of talent. But that said, he is the talent. He is something special. In the fight he took to the Marquez, at the very beginning of the sprint, when that pass on the outside of turn 2 or 3 or whatever it is, he's trying like hell.
Oh, and it was remarkable.
Yeah. He's pushing as hard as he can. And even when he got into the beginning of the race, and Marc Marquez can kind of bully people a bit on the Ducati because he knows what it can do and he can kind of push you out of the way and get away with it. Quatararo wasn't having it. He pushed and Quattaro was like kind of stuck right back in and, put both of them just as much on the line as Marc was willing to. And Marc kind of has to back off in that situation. And I think Quatararo in those examples, he's a good example of what you have to do against a guy like Marc. A guy who's willing to not push you around so much physically, but I'm going to put you in a spot where one of us has to back out and it won't be me, right? Quatararo is willing to put him, tough it out and then put him right back in the same spot, which I think is whether they say it outwardly or not, I think there's a significant amount of respect between those guys when they see that kind of thing. I think you can try to do that with a guy like Marquez foolishly, like what we've seen other riders do, where they try to tough it out and then sure enough, they both get knocked down. But I think the way Quatararo handles it is he just has the skill and he's on another level than all the other guys except Marc.
We know a lot of racers. We personally know a lot of national champions. And I think that's the kind of respect that's where respect comes from a racer, is someone who will, kind of put you in your place or hold their ground or come right back at you. That's almost how you earn respect, right? And yeah, I think Quatararo, I think he gets criticized because he's not an exceptional test rider. Or he doesn't have the reputation of being a very good test rider. He's not really good at providing feedback. And I listened to an interview with one of the team principals or the team leaders or whatever, and he was saying, yeah, he goes, with the data versus the feedback, he goes, the feedback's just an opinion, right? But the data is something that's a little bit more measurable. And, I think he was alluding to, if I was reading between the lines, that Quatararo provides really good data, even though his feedback may not be very good, because he's out there pushing the bike right to its limit. So even though his opinion might be off, or his comprehension or his understanding might not be there, his riding skill and his talent is.
Yeah. And I do really hope, it sounds like Yamaha's going to bring out the V4 with their test rider here for the next round in San Marino.
Super excited about that.
I can only figure, so they're bringing out with a test rider, which is great. The fact that they're even willing to bring it to a race means they feel they're ready to put it on display, right? Because if you thought your V4 wasn't even close still, there's no way you're putting it in front of all the cameras. So I don't know that it's prime time ready to go take it to Ducati exactly, but they're at least confident enough to put it under the microscope essentially, and let everybody see what it does.
I'm a little surprised that they're just giving it to the test rider. And I understand the homologation rules, so there might be some rule in here that is why it's happening this way. But to me, the inline four is a dead technology, at least for now. Mm-hmm. So, you can get a test ride or something, and they did this, I can't remember, with not necessarily Yamaha, but another team did this where they were having a handling issue, so they went and they basically hollowed out the frame around the headset. Mm-hmm. And the test rider went out and he goes, oh, this is amazing. It just gave me great front end feel. But it made the bike actually flexy. So when they put it to the actual racers, all of a sudden it was kind of terrible because they're pushing it much harder. Yeah. So it's, I don't want to question Yamaha's wisdom again, like, well, you should listen to us. Right. You should listen to the braking zone to make your tactical decisions. But I kind of wonder, why are they not just switching over to the V4? If they're willing to put it out with their test rider, just give it to Quatararo. It can't be worse than what's there now.
Well, I would assume then that this is kind of a shakedown, a race weekend shakedown, right? Let's keep Fabio on the bike that we know runs and isn't going to hurt him. And let's let the test rider bring this thing out at a race weekend. Let Fabio see it.
Well, Fabio's testing it today, actually. We're taping on Monday, and I think he's riding it today.
But I don't think, I think there's a pretty big difference between testing at a track or at a test event and a race weekend. I think getting to see it in with the other bikes is probably one, is they're checking the box of, yep, we survived a race weekend with the V4. We kind of got it stuck in with other bikes and it seemed like it worked okay. Then, maybe they bring it out. There's also the other part of the factories only have so many resources. They can only produce things so fast. They may not have enough of them yet. So there may only be so many, and they might go to the test rider and be like, here it is. Do not fall down on it, right? Whereas you can't go to your $1 million a month, contract racer and say, do not fall, because he's here to race. You paid him to race. He's going to push as hard as he can.
Yeah, that's a really excellent point that I hadn't considered, that, like, what if the test rider has one?
He may show up with one and then some spare parts.
Right.
Genuine, right? That may be all he has. I don't know. Yamaha's not small, but they're definitely not the biggest factory, right? So it may be that. It may be send it out for a round. Let's go see how it shakes out. And then the next round is in Motegi in Japan, or, Iwata is in Japan. Do they use this as, let's work the bugs out, make sure it runs for a whole race weekend? And then from Japan forward, do you see Quatararo on the V4?
So from a marketing standpoint, that makes really good sense. That at Motegi, which is one of my favorite tracks of the year, so I love when they go to Motegi, we unveil it, we put all the Yamaha on the V4s, and that's kind of the switch, right? At your home track, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And, based on just their street bikes, right? Yamaha's engines are exceptional. right? Like when they switched over to the triples, like, well, Triumph has all the triples. What's Yamaha going to do with the triples? Their triples are dynamite.
They're excellent.
Yeah, they're fantastic. So I can only imagine how good, and I still hope Honda, Yamaha, start selling production V4s, right? Like Ducati and Aprilia figured it out. Well, to sell V4s to the masses, like it's a MotoGP based engine, but the RPM is cut in half. Like, but I'm still satisfied,
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, if they bring it out, if they test it out and it works all right or works well, hopefully it's great. Hopefully it comes out of the box and it's great. Then bring it to Motegi, put your other riders on it, let them, and then basically treat the rest of the season as testing. Why wouldn't you? Right? Put the fastest guys you got on it and let them test it for the season. You just get such a head start. I don't know why, to your point, their inline 4 in MotoGP is dead. The faster you move, the better. I don't know why you'd wait.
Right. And we knew this last year. Well, we knew it like halfway through last year that this was announced, the V4, and I've been hoping for it to show up ever since then. Because my bias is I still believe the V4 is the greatest motorcycle engine of all time. I love them.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see that. I hope that pans out. I hope I'm not just making stuff up. I hope we too get to see them in Motegi, at least Quatararo on it. Maybe they don't have enough for Miller and everybody, but at least put Quatararo on the thing. Let's just see.
I completely agree. And I would love to see. I've been looking forward to it since it was announced. Yeah. So let's talk about Acosta.
Yeah.
Acosta. He sure made an odd decision.
It was a ballsy move. It seemed really odd. So what Dave's referring to is in the GP race, the full length race, he decided, I kind of feel like it was on the grid, he decided to put a soft rear tire on for the race. No, he was the only one that did. Everyone else was on the medium. Catalunya is a notoriously abrasive track. Basically from the third lap on, I'd say, the riders are trying to conserve tire. The first 2 laps, you're trying to get into your pecking order of where you're going to kind of like, this is my group for the race. I'm going to fight for 5th, or I'm going to fight for the win or whatever. They're kind of fighting and pushing hard for those first 2 or so laps. And then they kind of settle in for the long run and then hope that they can just save tire. To go with the soft, he had to think, without the soft, I can't get in with the lead group. So the soft will get me in with the lead group. I'll get stuck in, and then I'll just be able to be gentle enough to make it last. The KTM is not known for making tires last, though. I don't know that it's particularly bad at it, but it's not known for it. So it did seem like a very odd decision. And sure enough, I want to say it was 8 or so laps into a 22-lap race, 21-lap race. And he was suddenly 3/4 of a second slower, then slower, and just went back.
Oh, yeah. He literally just fell off the back. And it was, and it's, Acosta's not known for being a tire whisperer, right? There are riders like Zarco and Bastianini who are known to be magicians with shag tires.
Yep.
And no one's ever said that about Acosta, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
So it was just a really odd decision.
And I don't know if it was a little bit influenced by the battle that they had on the sprint race, where he and Bastianini and Binder were going at it hard. If he was trying to make sure he had something to deal with the battle that he thought was coming. But even then, I don't really understand that, because he had to know. I mean, he knows, he's been in GP long enough. He knows that this is a long race. You got to make it last. And he didn't. So it was a poor, I think more so than the race result, it reflected more that you took a gamble that you definitely didn't need to take. You were competitive in the sprint race. You shouldn't have taken a gamble like that one. And so, I don't know, judgment, it didn't look like a smart move. It didn't look like a clever, good try, but it didn't work. It just didn't look clever.
Because overall, KTM has really, I think if Acosta was making better choices and Bastianini was a little bit more consistent, I think KTM would be right up there with Aprilia as far as who's actually in the best position to contend with Ducati.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that Maverick's still recovering from an injury, because earlier in the season, he looked like the Maverick that we all hoped to see, because it was special and he was fast and he looked smooth and easy. But yeah, the injuries definitely set him back quite a bit, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I feel like it's been a huge loss, not just for us as fans, but for KTM, that Maverick, Maverick has had probably the most contentious or controversial career, like his little temper tantrum with Yamaha, his little temper tantrum with Aprilia.
Yeah.
He's kind of an emotional guy. It made me happy to see him succeeding so well at KTM, and I was delighted to see that. And then for this injury, which is more serious than I thought it was, to still be holding him back, really is a shame. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. But yeah, otherwise, I think there was a lot of interesting things happening at the race, but the racing wasn't the most interesting.
And Aprilia had the worst weekend imaginable.
Yeah, man, they had terrible luck.
Freaking Morbidelli. So I looked it up. Who do you think, I'm just going to throw this out there, who do you think has been served more long lap penalties than anyone else?
Well, since we just said it, I'm going to assume Morbidelli.
It's actually Bastianini, but only because Bastianini has been served several double long lap penalties. But I believe Morbidelli has still caused more crashes than any other rider, and has been served more penalties overall.
If they had a statistic for, because you can get penalties for being overly aggressive
and penalties for being slow and during qualifying, there's a lot of ways you can get a long lap.
Well, but if they could keep a statistic of penalties for bonehead moves, then Morbidelli's he's Marc Marquez.
He's winning the championship. Yeah, he's totally in the lead on that championship. And yeah, it's just, I don't want to wish ill on anybody, but I'm surprised he got another year. It's that he's still...
Well, I think it goes back to the VR46 thing.
Yeah.
If Rossi didn't have a team for his buddy to ride for, there's no way Morbidelli's in MotoGP still. Right?
I have to agree with you.
And the really unfortunate thing is, you could probably attribute some of the more recent issues to that massive crash he had.
Yeah.
Right? He was in testing on a production bike, had a massive high side, I guess, and really hucked himself. There's no video of it, I don't believe, because it was at a test. But it was bad enough that Marc Marquez, who was also with the test on the production Ducati, I think he and Alex maybe, but Marc for sure, rode off track to go render aid to Morbidelli, because at these test events, they don't have the same type of staffing trackside, right? They went up to go help him. And Morbidelli even said that he saved his life, right? So you got to wonder, how serious was that head injury? And is that a factor in some poor decisions? And, head injuries have gotten, TBIs specifically, have gotten a lot of attention in other sports, NFL, football, for example. We don't really talk about it a whole lot in motorsport. But it is, I don't know, maybe it's time that becomes a topic that we consider a little more closely.
Yeah, I'm not really a sport ball fan. I don't really pay attention to them, but I was happy when football got all the attention, and because we ride mountain bikes and stuff like that, the amount of technology that flooded the market rather quickly, that it almost makes me angry how much technology is in my current mountain bike helmet. It far eclipses my $200 mountain bike helmet, $180 mountain bike helmet. The technology in that far eclipses my $1,000 motorcycle helmet, because it has anti-rotational technology in it. My motorcycle helmet doesn't. It has different densities for compression and impact points. It has Reco. It has you can scan it and get all your health information right off the helmet. There's all these things that are being put into, that's been put into mountain bike helmets in other helmets that we're not seeing in the motorcycle industry yet. I mean, there's a couple companies who are being pretty progressive. 60 Helmets is putting anti-rotational technology. I have a Climb adventure helmet, uses Colroyd, which is these little hexagon straws instead of styrofoam. So it doesn't get more dense as it compresses. So it has the same level of give throughout an impact event.
So it collapses.
It collapses at the same rate, where styrofoam gets harder and harder to collapse as it goes. It stays the same density, and I kind of wish that we got that with other helmets.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the helmet technology part is very interesting. I know that you and I, we don't really talk about the specific brands of gear that we ride, but for sure I put priority on having a top brand for everything. Not because I think you need to have a name brand to have good protection, but I trust a name brand that's been around a long time. If you are a name brand and you've been around for a long time, it's unlikely you're going to just throw your reputation to the wind and make bad gear. And you probably also have the budget to engineer and research and develop good gear. The other thing, you bring up helmets though, the interesting thing with motorcycle helmets specifically is there's different safety rating systems. And I actually think that is a good thing and a bad thing. So there's DOT approved, which is
Nonsense.
It's nothing. There's Snell, there's ECE, and now there's an FIM one. There's maybe more that I'm not even familiar with.
There was BSI for a while, but I think BSI and ECE are kind of the same thing. There's the Sharp system, which I think is also pretty much basically the ECE standard. It's a rating system.
Yeah. But I know I have, ever since it has come out. So one of the questions I've been asked before from people is, well, what's the best helmet? What's the safest helmet? Is it the $300 one or the $3,000 one? Well, all I can really tell you is what safety rating does it meet? And if this one meets a lower one and this one meets a higher one, then presumably this is the safer one, because that's all you can go off of. But if they both meet the same safety rating, a $400 helmet that's ECE or a $1,000 helmet that's ECE, it's still just ECE at the end of the day, right? So now they'll all make claims, and I promise in the comments there'll be anecdotes about what's what and which one's better. But at the end of the day, no one can point to anything factual other than the certification standards. So I was really excited when FIM came out with a higher standard. And it has a certain standard for the shell, composite shell, the foam, the different things about it had to be at a kind of a higher tier. And MotoGP and Moto2, those riders, World Superbike, I believe as well, if it's FIM sanctioned, you must wear an FIM helmet, period. Which, on a past podcast, you mentioned you won't buy a bike that the manufacturer doesn't race in GP because you love the sport. I love the fact that, hey, I won't buy a helmet that isn't FIM certified at this point. Not because I'm a MotoGP racer, but if there's a higher standard, I'm going to spend the money and have that. So I think the standard thing's a really interesting part. The downside of it, I think, is it probably precludes some innovation and some different engineering paths. Because they say, well, at the end of the day, your helmet has to meet these standards. So if you come up with a really clever solution that creates a lower acceleration on a crash or prevents rotational things like that, if that somehow damages your ability to pass that standard, it probably isn't going to get through, right? The helmet's never going to exist until the standard changes. So I don't know. The standard problem with helmets is, it's a good thing, I think, because it sets a standard, but it might actually hold us back.
It's a really deep topic, and I covered it in a video long ago that maybe should be revisited, re-explored. Because to your point, if it meets the standard, right, you don't have to buy a $10,000 helmet to get the same safety standard if it's in a $3,000 helmet. Now, Snell, Snell helmets is like the American, if you're racing in America, you need to have a Snell standard. And sometimes it can be a little misleading because where your rankings can sometimes come in American helmets might be failed inspections. And you can fail an inspection if the labels are on wrong or the label's in the wrong place, and that'll bring your ranking down. Now, I personally do not agree with the Snell standard. The Snell standard measures two impacts at the exact same point. Now, I've been riding motorcycles for a long time. That doesn't really happen. Mm-hmm. And I think to survive two impacts at the same point, they have to make the shell stiffer. And what we're learning with all these other sports is that that may not necessarily be the right solution. So I actually order my helmets out of Europe to get the ECE standard from the same helmet. My Arai, which looks like an XT4 sold in America, actually came from Europe. So it has the ECE standard because I wanted the softer shell. And additionally, to the FIM point, not endorsed, I'm not sponsored by any of these people. I was really excited about the HJC that I just purchased that has the FIM standard because I feel it's my brain. It's who I am. It's everything that I know. Like learning how to tie my shoes the first time was hard enough. I don't want to have to learn to do it again. And just to your point, I cannot agree more completely. I am not scrimping on my helmet, and I replace them frequently. I replace them more often than I need to. And a little tidbit, what I like to do is a lot of times I like to buy a helmet that's 2 or 3 years old. You get it on discount, and then so I can replace my helmets more frequently, right? Because you get them cheaper. They really only have a 5-year lifespan because ozone and all these things break down the materials. And I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to be in a fresh helmet like more frequently because it's my head,
So outside of the safety rating, so you prefer ECE helmets, FIM as well, higher standards. Outside of the safety rating, let's say the helmet meets FIM. Let's say there's 8 helmets that meet FIM, because I think there are something like 8 or 10 helmets now that do meet that higher standard. What are you looking for outside of that?
I want a really pretty paint job. No, I want it to
that matters.
No, I want it to fit my skull, right? And it's different nationalities have different head shapes, right? Some Japanese and Asian have a more round head. Americans are known for having a longer oval head, and fit is such a critical part of it. I love Arai helmets, but part of why I love Arai helmets is because they fit my noggin, right? And so like fit and comfort, when I'm doing like an all-day shoot where I'm like the helmet's on my head for 10 or 12 hours, it has to be comfortable. So that's a big one for me.
So helmet fit, paint job is second for you. When I buy a helmet, because I don't ride in the street, it's for a racetrack application when I buy one. I mean, I ride dirt bikes too. That's a little bit different. We'll stick to the street stuff. I'm looking for the viewport window. For me, that's the most important. So if it meets the safety standard, that's number one. If it does, then I'm very keen on what is the viewport. Because when you're on the racetrack, if you're racing, aggressively, as you're tipping and looking through, oftentimes you're looking through the very top of the viewport of the view window. So I'm always looking for a helmet. If a helmet, like older school helmets, had really letterbox, viewports, and if the shield is a long ways away from your head, it makes it even worse, like a tunnel. So I would always prioritize a really tall viewing window. The AGVs were far and away the best ones for a long time. When they came out with theirs, that was more that style. Now more and more of the other brands have picked that up and started creating a much better viewport. But that's a huge thing for me to consider. The other thing on that is and this will get a little nuanced too, but it's for racing, the cut of the bottom edge of the helmet. So again, if you go look at, we don't have any helmets here on hand, but if you look at the way the helmet sits on the head, if you looked at it in profile, does it come lower in the chin and then arc way up high toward the back of the head? That's really important for racing again, or track riding, because as you're turning and moving, your head comes really close to the back of the leathers. And if it conflicts with the leathers, it'll bind, and it can sometimes cause double vision and cause issues for riders. So those are like weirdly the two most important things. The paint job almost doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're wearing a black helmet right now, just a plain carbon fiber.
I think the last 2 helmets I've had are just plain black. Yeah.
I think that is an unbelievably excellent point because context matters. Yeah. On the track, I'm wearing an AGB, and I think it's my 3rd AGB on the track for the exact things that you mentioned. The bigger porthole and the higher in the back for me is massive. I have a shorter neck. And so when I was trying to ride on the track with my Arai, the back of the helmet came lower, and as soon as I looked up, the helmet would would stab the back of my neck and I would see double. And so I was riding with one eye closed so I could only see one version. And I'm like, this is not good. And when I went to the AGV, and it's so high in the back, it went away. And that was a huge safety thing. Now, on the street, my favorite helmet on the street is I love peaked helmets, but I'm riding upright motorcycles. And the reason why I love peaked helmets is because it's like a sun visor. I can dip it down to get the sun out of my eyes. If it's raining, I dip it down and the overspray hits the little brim and my visor stays clear, but I'm sitting bolt upright. So context is a massive part of what's going to make the helmet work for you. There is no, it's my favorite thing to say, the right helmet is, it depends. It depends on user requirements and how you're using the helmet.
It's another good point too, though, is when you're buying a helmet or looking at helmets, consider the way that you're built. So do you have a longer or shorter neck, or are you very broad shouldered and big, shoulders? All of that stuff, the less room between your shoulders and your ears, the leathers that you wear, the jacket or whatever it is that you wear is going to bunch up more. And if the helmet's low, I've seen plenty of riders that come out to do a track day and they have someone's jacket that they've borrowed that doesn't fit very well. It's a little too loose or a little too scrunched up. And all day long, their neck is getting, or their head's getting kind of stuck because it's rubbing against the leathers the whole time. I can't tell you how, when you go from having a situation where you don't have any conflicts, you don't have any issues with mobility because of your gear, to suddenly having it, it is unbearable. I recently did, what you did, where you mentioned you replace helmets more often than you have to. I did the same thing. For the beginning of this season, I had bought a new helmet and it came out and did a track day with it. And I thought it was going to check all my boxes. It was FIM. It's a great helmet. It was really popular. I was really excited about it. And I put it on and I went out for the first session, and within 2 laps, oh, this isn't going to work. I just spent how much money on a helmet that I can't wear out here, because it immediately was rubbing on the collar or something on the suit was rubbing. So it's either get another helmet or try to find a suit that is shaped differently so it doesn't conflict. But I think it's an undervalued piece. I think a lot of riders get just some gear and don't consider all these things about how it all has to somewhat work together.
So there's 2 points I think we need to talk about with this topic. And that helmet that you bought, and we're not going to mention it, but it does. It rates very high. I was considering buying one as well. And I would again, but a lot of this gear now is designed to work together. That helmet is designed to work with the corresponding suit. The collar on the suit that goes with that helmet is designed differently to not interfere with the helmet. And it's the same thing with the AGV stuff that you and I wear, is designed to work really well with the AGV suits. I think that's a little bit unfortunate, to be honest with you, because I like matchy kit as much as anybody who rides road bicycles on the road, right? Like it's kind of neat to be like, everything's all color matched and you feel like a Power Ranger and you feel super cool about it. But I also think that's also prohibitive. Like a lot of people, they're buying gear that's on sale or it's the right price, or the helmet fits great and the suit fits great or the jacket fits great, and maybe they don't work together. It's a huge frustration with a lot of gear. But the second part of this thing that we really need to talk about is, still to this day, most riders, and I think the number is like 80% still buy helmets that are one size too large. And I had a student, and she was lovely. She's one of my favorite students I've ever taught. And she came out and she was struggling. She had these things, all these problems, and I couldn't really source like why she was having these issues. Well, after the event, we were looking at all the photos from the photographer, and her helmet was so big that it was sliding down to the bridge of her nose, and she couldn't see. And I was like, and I was like, I hate to do this to you, but you have to fix your gear. You have to fix this helmet. And she did, and it solved almost all of the riding problems that she was having because she could see. So, we should say, like, I like the color, I like the safety standard, but getting it to fit right is arguably probably the most important aspect of getting a helmet.
Yeah, it's kind of with all gear too. If you have something, a piece of gear or the way the gear interacts together that doesn't quite work, it binds, it rubs, it kind of impinges. It's amazing how distracting that can be, and it can kind of ruin the experience. The best is when my favorite. I did this a year ago, I think. I had a helmet that had gotten several little pits and rock chips and stuff. And as you get them, you don't think much about them. You're fine. You can see. And then you finally put on a new visor that is brand new and clean and clear. And you're sort of so mad at yourself that you dealt with this visor that was pitted and scratched for so long. And you're like, why did I waste all that time? And like, I kind of got to look around these little marks and get good gear that fits. If you've got, gloves that bind on a collar, get different gloves. It can make all the difference for the whole experience itself if you're just not irritated by something.
When I was newer to this sport, I bought a motorcycle that came with a brand new helmet. And the helmet was my size, and I was so excited because it just saved me that much money. It was a used bike helmet. I had worn once or twice, and I was like, oh, it's mine. I'm good with it. And it was the wrong shape helmet. It was a round helmet with my oval head. And within, I'm not kidding, maybe 15 miles, I was ready to pull off and throw the thing into the bushes, right? And it's so important that if your gear is distracting you, like riding at the racetrack, we're riding at a very high level. And I know a lot of these racers, I've talked to people who work for Dainese, and like some of the racers are really, really picky. And they're like, I don't like this scene. It cuts into my arm, right? And it hurts, and you're like, oh, and you're like, but then you think about it from like a different perspective and you're like, wait a minute, when I'm trying to do this thing that is arguably dangerous and high risk, and if that's taking my focus away,
think about it. Yep.
Then okay, there's legitimacy to that. Like, let's fix that then. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I should say that Dave and I are not sponsored or supported by any of these manufacturers that we've mentioned.
No, none of them.
So none of these are recommendations. I wouldn't say that. It's just these are.
I think it's more important to find what works and fits you, right? Like, I can throw out. We do have a deal right now with NBT clothing, and it's a street specific gear. And what I really love about what NBT is doing, is that their whole motto is, we're going to make street gear that looks normal and is more comfortable, but it might only be CE1 or CE2, which is like the slightly lower safety standard, because they're like, we'd rather people wear something than just blue jeans. And I really believe in that whole thing, that the best gear you have is the gear that you have on. Mm-hmm. So wear something, wear something that's this is a little funny thing. I met a guy, and he was talking about his sock drawer, and his socks were all mismatched and whatever, right? And he goes, well, my top drawer is just socks for whatever, and the middle drawer is dress socks, and the bottom drawer is socks with jobs, right? Because these are the socks that I wear with motorcycle boots. These are the socks that I wear hiking. These are the socks with jobs. These are the important socks. And I think it's for riding gear, it has a job to do. And it's an important job. And, I hate watching YouTube videos with like influencers and stuff, and they're not wearing glasses and they're not wearing gloves, and they're lecturing me about a safe technique. And you're like, dude, come on. Like, where's the appropriate gear for what you're doing?
And I will say, I think gear, your choices, whether you wear gear or not, totally a personal decision.
I would agree. Yeah.
Right. I've had this conversation with others before where they don't like getting lectured about what they should do and stuff. And I'm a big proponent of, it's your body. You do what you want to do with it. You be safe or not safe, however you want to do that. But once you get to the point where you are considering these things, these are really important factors.
Right. And I've thought about making a video on this topic, and let me know if you want me to explore this further. That all the gear all the time is not an excuse to be a dick to your buddies. Right? It's a personal choice. Right? Like, and there are times that I know the context, and it's one thing I really love about Champ School is that All right, I go to the beach with my buddies and I put my helmet in the trunk. They go home before me. Now I have to get home without my helmet. This isn't really a choice I wanted to make, but now I'm going to adjust my riding based on my level of gear. And I think this is a really smart way to think about it. In that, there's a coffee shop 2 blocks away from me. I like to take the scooter, or Honda just sent me a Dax. I'm going to take the Dax down to get coffee, right? I'm not going to put on my full leather speed onesie to go get a coffee shop. Right. Instead, I'm going to adjust my riding to my conditions. And I think that's something else that we really should be paying more attention to.
I like that we went down a rabbit hole of gear first.
But gear is fun. Yeah. I own way more motorcycle jackets than any human needs to, because it's this eternal search for the perfect motorcycle jacket. And my favorite jacket, you guys commented on all the time. Like whenever I wear it in a video, you're like, what is that? And it is the perfect motorcycle jacket that was taken out of production 15 years ago. And it's a perfect coat.
So if you're a gear manufacturer and you want to make the
reach
jacket
out to me, Dave has got Lee's. It is the perfect motorcycle coat minus one thing, and we could fix it. And it is ready. I'm ready. I'm ready to make that jacket. It is the greatest jacket.
You could call it the Canyon Chaser.
Call it the Canyon Chaser. We'll work out like some sort of royalty thing. I don't know how to make gear, but I can tell you what makes a perfect motorcycle coat.
It's a good pitch. I like that. All right.
Someday.
We were out the track this past weekend. We ride at Utah Motorsport Campus, or now Burt Brothers Motor Park. But we were on a unique experience. We get to ride the perimeter configuration, which means we get to do the full front straight. It is, for the longest time, it was the longest front straight at a road course in America. Do you know which one's longer?
I'm going to say Coda.
Yeah. By 200 or 300 feet.
Oh, that's it. That's not the only time.
Wow. So our front straight is just over a kilometer long.
It's fast.
It is fast. Ours, I believe the corner leading onto Coda straight is kind of a first gear, sort of hairpin-ish kind of corner, if I remember right. Ours is similar, but more like a second gear.
Yeah, second to third, depending on how you get into it.
Well, we get to go on the front straight. Now,
you have GPS on your bike. Everyone's wanting to know. You're faster than me. What was your GPS top speed on the front straightaway? Because that's the only number I'm going to believe. Everybody was telling us what their speedometer said. I'll tell you what my speedometer said. We're on the same bike. What did your...
The highest I saw it clock on there was a 173.
Okay. So that's really interesting. You are faster than me. I guarantee you are getting a better drive out of release, and you're going into turn one quicker than I am. I saw 178 on the speedometer. That is a massive gap in difference, and you were definitely going faster than me.
Well, and that was in a race. So that was me going literally as fast as I could go and braking as late as I could.
Don't believe your speedometer.
Yeah. But even then, we're part of that. People might be like, oh, that's not so fast. MotoGP goes 220 or whatever. Right? Well, granted, we're not on MotoGP bikes for one, but two, we're at 4,500 feet. Where the track is, we're a mile up.
It's 15% power loss. So what I understand, 17.
17.
Yeah.
I did the math, so.
Accuracy matters.
Yeah. Somebody in the comments will give me some decimal place.
17.328. Depending on how hot it is.
Yeah. But it is shocking, because when we do the half track configurations, we're hitting maybe 130 to 140 at most. Probably a little less. Probably 130-ish. Another 40 miles an hour on top of that feels different. And when you sit up to go to the brakes for that first corner, when you're this, it's not so scary once you're racing because you've done enough laps to get practice in. But that first couple practice laps when you're pushing and you're trying to push your brake marker back, it is a scary way to enter that corner. Now, when I'm racing on the front straight, I have to use an external reference. Because when you're going down that front straight and you're tucked behind the bubble, and honestly, the front straight's fairly bumpy at that speed, you're kind of getting jostled around a fair bit. I have to look for an external reference to know when to pop up and brake. But it's not like that. It was funny because that was the topic of the day with all the racers, was where are you braking for turn one? That came up all day long, the whole weekend. And we talked about it with everybody, but there's lots of corners where it's way more nebulous. When do you go to the brakes, or how do you go to the brakes? I'm curious what your thoughts were on that.
So this is really timely because I just happened to have published a video on Sunday that is the 5 corner references every rider should know. And it goes into a lot of depth as to what you should be looking for to make it through a corner, right? And the argument of the video is that, you know, all the, like when I was an MSF instructor, all the coaching, it was always about eyes up, get your chin up, look further ahead. And I remember even back then, eyes up where? What am I supposed to be looking at, right? And then you get to the racetrack and then it is, you know, braking markers and, you know, line up with this corner stand or put your tires on this seam to make it over this blind hill. And there's all these little reference points to help make you around. And when I became certified with Yamaha Champ School, I really resonated with the language they use of we go to the brakes when we're nervous and we slow until we're happy with our speed and direction. And I really love this because I think, A, it gives riders who were taught to ride by rote permission to slow down when you're nervous. And I love that about it. And it's more specific to the rider, the motorcycle, and the situation. Because coming down the full straightaway into turn 1, where I get nervous is wildly different than where I get nervous when we're just doing half track. But listening to my gut and my intuition, and if I'm keeping my visual reference up, that, you know, nervousness or the little tinglies or whatever are as good of an indicator as anything, assuming that you are looking for reference points through the corner. Because I've talked to a couple national and world championships, and I've always asked them, what braking marker do you use? And I've had more than one say, I don't even ever look at them, right? So I think it's a nuanced topic. And I think on one hand, you don't want to be riding afraid, but on the other hand, I hate the idea of riding by row sequence. I go to breaker marker 3 and then I pop up when I jam to the brakes. Now, you spend most of your time on the racetrack. What are your feelings on this? Because we ride in different contexts a lot of the time.
So when we're racing, it's a very specific goal. I'm trying to have the shortest possible lap time for the entire race, because the winner of the race isn't the guy who sets the fastest lap time. It's the guy who gets the race done in the shortest amount of time. So it isn't just how fast you go for one lap, it's how repeatable can you be. So if you're trying to be really repeatable, you do start creating references and markers and so forth for yourself to have some gauge. But that doesn't mean that I can use the exact same reference and do the exact same thing there every time, because a 1-lap tire and a 15-lap tire behave very differently, right? So this may be where I go to the brakes on the first lap or the second lap, but I may not be able to brake that late on the 14th lap or the 15th lap, because not only is the bike is now very hot, the brakes are very hot, I'm getting fatigued, the tires aren't as good as they were. There's all these things that build up that you have to start making adjustments, and you have to pay attention to what the bike is telling you, right? So if you go through, I'll use an example, and if you're familiar with UMC, you'll know what corner I'm talking about, but there's a corner called Tooele Corner. And it's as textbook of a corner as you can get. It's a fast entrance, it's about 90 degrees, and it's a long straight exit. It's literally a textbook corner, but it's extremely nuanced in application, right? So it's cambered in the middle of it. It's a little bumpy on the exit. There's some bumps you have to deal with on the outside. It slopes away for you. So there's several factors you have to think about with that corner, but you come into it, and when your tires are really fresh, I can brake really late and I can come in with a ton of corner speed, and the front will stick and I'll be able to roll through it. Later in the race, the front won't stick the same. It'll chatter, it'll slide. All kinds of little things will change. So I'll have to change what I do. But if you're paying attention to all these things and making adjustments as you go, this past weekend we were racing in the main race was, I think it's 10-lap race. My lap time from the first flying lap to the last flying lap was basically a second.
Wow.
For the whole race. It was within a minute.
Done. That's impressive.
And I'm not bragging, but it's in order to do that, you have to be really consistent and really kind of hitting your marks essentially the whole time through.
I'm going to disagree with you. I think to be consistent like that, I think you have to be very adaptable.
Well, that's what I'm saying though. Like I have markers that I'm looking for, but I'm making adjustments as the race goes on. So instead of, for example, twill a corner, instead of waiting till the two board or whatever it is, when I go to the brakes, downshift and turn in, I might have to roll off a little sooner, roll the brakes on a little sooner, be a little more gentle and carry a little more roll speed through it because I don't have quite the same grip that I did before in order to get everything to continue the overall speed of the lap. But yeah, so like I have markers, but I'm making judgment calls constantly.
I really love this point. I think this is part of what I love about track riding. If you were to hang out in the pits, if you've never done a track day, and we hang out in the pits, and everybody's always talking about, I'm struggling with this corner or that corner. And we will talk in very specific terms as to, like, in the case of this weekend, there's a corner called Witchcraft that we only ride once every 2 years or so whenever we get the option to do the perimeter configuration. And you were like talking about it. Well, I run my front tires over this cold patch seam that starts at about here. And I went out and I was like, I'm going to use Brian's reference. And sure enough, that made all the difference for it. So like, I'm absolutely using these little references to get through something. But I think kind of to my point is that the racetrack teaches you how to solve problems at a real world speed that then you can apply to a completely variable situation on the street. I ride into a corner that I've never seen before, and you can kind of understand it. Oh, this is like this corner at this track. I know if I dip in a little earlier than I think I ought to into this situation, it'll help me as I get down the hill or whatever I need to do. But I still really value the adaptability portion of it, right? Like on the track, we'll put out apex cones.
Mm-hmm.
And very rarely are the apex cones everyone always where I want them. And so then it'll be like, well, I'm going to apex 1 or 2 rumbles past it, or I'm going to apex 1 or 2 rumbles before it, or it'll shift as the day goes on, or as the fuel load changes, or as the tire wears. So
I'm curious when we're riding on the track, you do have all these repeatable markers that you go, oh, it was this thing last time. Give me 2 more minutes and it'll be that thing again, right? When you're doing these canyon rides, you may do this route on the way out and the next day do it the same route on the way back. But that's a totally different road. You're going in the opposite direction. But the weather could have changed, the condition, there could be gravel, there could be all kinds of, leaves are on the ground now. What is it that you're doing when you're coming into a corner and you really can't see all the way through a corner? Maybe there's trees or there's growth and you can't really see where you're going. What are the things that you're looking for to go, this is the right speed to get through this corner?
For me, it's really trust your gut, allow yourself to go slower. I think there's so much pressure in this sport to always go quicker. Even a lot of programs teaching brand new riders are telling you to be on the throttle through a corner. I think that puts you into a very difficult spot because have the freedom to just go a little slower, right? There's one corner, it's called, it's the road that takes you from the top of Guardsman Pass down to the town of Midway. I think it's called Pine Hollow Drive, no one knows the name of this canyon. Everyone calls it Guardsman, but that's not what it is. But there's one corner that I really want to go wide and dive in down the hill, but there's absolutely no visibility. And I just don't have the courage to do that. So because I can't see and because I don't have the information, I effectively flub it every time. I go to the brakes really, really early. I run right on the inside line. I'm basically almost putting my handlebars into the trees because I don't know what's coming up the hill. And I'm sacrificing every bit of efficiency, proficiency, and speed for safety in that corner. And I will do that every single time. And I think this is the beauty of prioritizing my exit, because if I flub my entrance into the corner on purpose, run shallow, stay against the trees, go to the brakes when I'm nervous, slow until I'm happy, if I wait till I get direction, well, I can make up all of that slowness when I have visibility. I can see that it's clear. I can see that it's straight and it's on the street. I can just twist the throttle and I can make up every bit of time that I lost in a much safer way than by trying to be quick where it's risky.
Yep.
And I think when that concept was presented to me it sounds stupid, but it's like finding the right religion. You're like, oh my gosh, it's this easy. It didn't have to work this hard at it. I can just, and I like don't have close calls anymore. I don't remember the last time I had a close call or I had a really scary situation on the street, because I lean into go to the brakes when I'm nervous, so I'm not afraid.
Yep.
I had somebody say to me, he's like, no, you go to the brakes when it's appropriate. Well, if I don't, what is that? What is that? How do I measure that? How do I define appropriate, right? It was the problem with a lot of the basic rider programs. Slow to a suitable entrance speed that allows you to accelerate throughout the entire corner. How do I measure that? All right, now I'm on a Ninja 400. Now I'm on a Hayabusa. What is that number? How is that quantifiable? But I'm nervous. I'm going to slow down until I'm not nervous. It's not scientific, but it is kind of measurable. And it does account for my comfort, how I'm feeling, what the grip feels like to me, if it's cold and my hands hurt, if it's warm and I feel good, right? Like it just feels more dynamic to me.
You rattled off a list of, I don't want to downplay them, but almost like bumper sticker mantras.
Did I really?
Yeah. Slow till you're comfortable. Like there was a couple of, that you went through. As you were saying those, I was like, there's probably at the track when riders come and ask for help or coaching or guidance, there's probably a list of 10-ish, probably less things that I can say to almost every newish rider, without even watching what they're doing on track, just listening to what they say. Like, this is probably what you need to think about.
Well, we've been teaching long enough. We've been coaching enough riders, and that's totally true. They explain a problem they're having in a corner. Like, I'm struggling in right hook and knockout. Because I got these silly names.
Yeah.
I love them, but it confuses me with the But anyway, I'm having this problem with this corner, and I'm running wide at the exit. And you're like, okay, open up your entrance. Yeah. Right? Move your apex 10 feet longer. Stay on the brakes 10 feet longer. Like, you can give them advice without ever seen them, and they come back and like, that made all the difference in the world.
It just, I imagine it's a similar thing though for street riding, where when you're talking with street riders who certain things are always, I always get nervous when blank, when this situation presents, or when I'm doing this or whatever. There's probably a handful of almost mantras that you can give people that think about this when this happens. This will probably get you through the situation.
Oh,
You don't have to list them all right now.
I will list them all right now, but I can tell you a couple of them.
Yeah.
It's eyes up sooner, faster eyes, go to the brakes sooner, go to the brakes earlier with less pressure, try it a gear higher.
Yep.
And that one that rattles a lot of people when I say try it a gear or two higher. And one thing I've discovered with a lot of riders is as they progress, they still downshift where and how they did as a brand new rider. That now their confidence has blossomed, their skill has blossomed, but they're still downshifting like they did as a new rider. And there are so many riders, I can't even tell you the number, that I'll give them this advice. And they'll come back to me and be like, oh my gosh, that smoothed out everything. I was less nervous. I had more confidence because I had less engine braking, so they could be more precise with the front brake and their throttle or whatever they were trying to do. And it just smooths everything out, which you wouldn't expect that.
I'd be interested to hear other people's like one-liners.
Yeah, I love your one-liner.
Riding tip one-liner.
Yeah, it was my favorite. Like, wait for the wade.
Yeah.
See everything. Look at nothing. I love these little things. Yeah. And for a while, I was making videos titled with my favorite little mantras. They performed abysmally. They did. I think my little mantras need context before they actually let it work.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear what everyone's got.
I want to hear them. I love that. Yeah. I get them all the time. People sometimes will comment with their little mantras, and I do steal them. I do. Some of them are really good.
One of them I do give riders at the track, because the track is it's slightly different animal, right? It's same idea, but different animal. So a lot of the corners are much more dramatic, more like a 180 or whatever type corner. A lot of times what I tell riders who are struggling with visual lead, they're not looking far enough ahead for the speed that they're going. So everything's kind of a panic and a late response. I always tell them to point their chin where they want to go. Because if you point your if you look where you want to go, you just dart your eyes over. But if you point your chin, you've got to get your eyes up and your head turned to do it. And that is a good little like mental cue for some folks to just, I can't just like glance over it. I've got to look at it.
There's a physiological reason why that works so well. And our eyes are the way our ocular nerve works. Our eyes are more stable in our skull when they're centered in our eye sockets. So when we're doing this whole like eyeball around thing, like even sitting at your desk or whatever, if you're listening to this in the car and you move your eyes to like side to side, it kind of gets a little fuzzy. You don't see quite as clearly and it's a little bit uncomfortable. But when you actually point your chin at what you're trying to see, your eyes are more stable. Everything's going to be a little bit more clear. And because I make these videos and I always have a camera, not always, but often have a camera pointed back at my face, when I am riding at a decent clip, it is interesting that my chin is doing this constantly because I'm moving my chin, my whole face, pointing it from reference to reference to reference to keep my acuity at what I'm doing, which also helps increase depth perception and all these other things. There's so many advantages to this simple little thing of point your chin.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. I love it. I love it.
I like that we have stuck not at all to the list of topics we had. This. I think we skipped a bunch of stuff. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I was listening to another podcast that I love, and they're like, is that it? And then they got distracted on something else. You know, like when we say that's it for the day, that's actually where the podcast starts. I think we're kind of turning into close to that. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, guys. See you next time.